And then I guess if I could ask everybody to get their cameras working for Chad's sake, so we can know who's falling asleep and who's not. And let me make sure we get rolling here. Okay, so this is I think it's week 7, and let me make sure. I'm getting to the point where we're into it so far that I forget what week we're in. Yeah, we're week 7. But this is our 6th speaker, and I wanted to give you all a chance to hear it from an expert on AI, because I think AI will become if it already isn't, a big influence in a lot of not only what we do, but with the tools that we're all familiar with. And I think it's good that we sort of not only get the exposure, but if you all have a chance to start dabbling in using some of these AI tools, it'll be really, I think, handy in the very, very near future. So wanted to give you guys a chance to do that. We don't spend too much on it in the book, but you can imagine all of the platforms that we're talking about, and all of the sort of constraints and environments that the book refers to will all be influenced by the AI technology. So I wanted to give you all a chance to hear it from an expert, and again, please ask any questions. Now, Chad, I do ask the class 5 questions, and I'll send you the 5 questions. Maybe I don't know if maybe I forgot to send you the 5 questions. I'll do it. I'll do it right now. But I should do it. So the idea is that Chad, 5 questions and basically 10 points. Each question is 2 points. The first 2 questions are pretty simple. One is, what's your name and what company do you work for? Okay, so but the key with those 2 questions is that they got to get the name and company spelled correctly. So, and then the other questions are really kind of questions directed at the topic. Let me shoot this to you, Chad, so at least you kind of know what I'm asking. Okay, so with that, I don't want to take away any thunder of Chad's introduction. He co-founded an AI company that supports businesses looking at getting into leveraging some of the tools, and supports not only commercial but education. But I want to give Chad a chance to say a little bit more detail as to kind of the work that he does. So Chad, go ahead and do your introduction.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and I'll just start sharing my slide deck now.
Okay.
And just take it from there. Okay, let me make sure I can share. Oh, can you give me sharing? Bert?
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yep. Here you go. Okay.
Okay. Let me share. All right. So I'm Chad Kumabe. I'm co-founder and president of Second Wave Technologies, and we've built this platform called Tadata AI. So, and Tadata AI is an AI assistant platform. I can go into it a little bit more, but it kind of will fit into some of the presentation. I can talk more about that later also, but I think you guys need some of the things on this slide. So here's my name. Here's the company I work for,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can take a screenshot now, right? So you can have it for your quiz. Um,
Well, Chad, I shared the slide deck with the students as well. So
okay, to make it a lot
they have
easier.
it available in the resources. So they
Okay,
better
great.
not get this wrong.
Yeah, that's automatic question. Oh yeah, so I've been doing software development and working in the technology industry for over 20 years now. Um, and you know, I think what I want to talk to you today is centered around AI and how it fits into the way that we communicate digitally. And when I think about it, there's been so much evolution, I guess, from you know maybe like when I was growing up, just a while ago in the 80s, and the way that we communicated then is very different from the way that we started communicating in the 2000s. And you guys probably already went all through this, right? I mean, that's the foundational pieces probably of this course. Um, but when I look at AI in its current state and the way that it's come on in the last 2 years, I feel like it's very transformational in the same way that, let's say, the internet and cell phones have been in at least the course of what I've experienced. So that's really what I want to touch on is how AI really intersects with digital communication. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of different topics. Let me see if I can progress my slides this way, right? So
Yep,
so
that's
there's
good.
two there's multiple topics actually around this, and there's two big ones I thought about when I was putting this presentation together. One is how we interact with different AIs like chatbots, right? So that when we interact with these artificial intelligent, or these things that seem artificially intelligent as a proxy as for interacting with other humans, right? So instead of interacting with another person, you're actually talking to a machine, right? And I think that communication is important to explore, right? Because that's very different, and it's going to be different in the future. And the other one, this AI augmenting human to human communication. Now, that's similar to like when we write an email and we have a way to correct the email or modify the email, right? And Apple is doing a lot of things around this. You think about like if you guys been seeing these Apple Intelligence campaigns, right, of how they're going to change the way that you're able to communicate, right? It's like you're going to be able to automatically respond to emails, or you're going to be able to automatically have the email written for you, or your text messages, right? So I think that's another huge way in which AI is really affecting the way that we are communicating with each other, and even the summarization of that as well, right? So they're saying, oh, App Intelligence, you can summarize that email, and it can tell you what that's about, which is really interesting because I was thinking about it yesterday when I was doing this, and I'm like, well, if the AI is writing the email and the AI is also reading the email, who are we sending these things to, right? So I think that's a really really interesting topic. But you know what? I want to focus on the AI interacting on behalf of the humans, or this chatbot idea. Like there's some interaction that we're having with some machine, but that's taking place instead of interacting directly with a human with all this knowledge, right? And it's kind of like how, we've seen this kind of in the past, with you can even think about like this auto reply in your email, right? You're sending an email to somebody, they're not there, and they're just saying that they're just automatically replying, "Hey, I'm not here. I'm on PTO. I'll be back in the office." And that's not AI necessarily. I mean, that's not AI, but it is a way of interacting back with somebody who's trying to communicate, with somebody else. And we've seen this other also with these chatbots like that. If you've used these customer service voice calls in the past where it says, "Oh, if you've had this issue, press two," or say the number two, or what is the ticket number, and say all the numbers in it, right? And those are very rudimentary. But I mean, things are really changing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and about some of the things around that. So I want to talk about these new interactions with AI. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the history of this, how this started. So back in 1964, there's somebody named Joseph Weizenbaum, and he created this system called ELIZA. ELIZA was very pattern based. It's like a pattern based recognition type of chatbot. It would recognize different types of pattern and have these responses, and then you can put these scripts in there. One of the, I guess, the famous one, not the famous one, is this doctor script. Right. So the doctor script was to have this chatbot act like it was a psychotherapist, and make like it was providing these intelligent answers, but when in fact it was just reflecting a lot of these patient statements, right? It didn't have any actual knowledge, so it would just kind of say something back. So it's like you can think of it as somebody saying like, "Oh, well, I'm having this problem with my brother, and I don't know what to do." And the therapist saying, "Well, why do you think that is?" Right? So it says like it doesn't really know anything. It's not really giving advice, but it's this way of just reflecting it. And it was pretty, at the time, I guess is kind of revolutionary. People were thinking, "Well, is this alive?" And the inventor of this is like, "No, it's not. It's not alive. It's not cognizant. It doesn't understand anything. It's just kind of a reflection of all of this, right?" And then fast forward, and there's been subsequent like iterations about on all this, but I think in our you know modern time, the biggest jumps came from when you had things like Siri or Alexa, right? These adding in a lot of this voice capabilities, which made you feel like you're really talking to possibly someone. You know, I remember when we first got our Echo and we started talking to Alexa. We were like we started to refer to it as like her, like, "Oh, what did Alexa say? Oh, she said this," right? When it's not really a thing, but this voice really started to, again, and it didn't really change from what Eliza was. It's still it doesn't really have an understanding of what's going on. It kind of would just match patterns, right? It's just matching patterns. It's just trying to figure out the right way and the right paths and use heuristics to kind of take actions or give answers and all of this, right? But that really set up, I think, what people felt like they could do with these AIs, and when the text process, the voice processing and sending out this voice, it really started to accelerate this idea. Well, maybe these AIs can be really helpful, and they're going to be pervasive in the way that we interact with different things. So that was in, let's see, 2014, and then ChatGPT happened in 2022. And I think that really started to, it, that was the moment, I think, when I started to realize that how accessible and how capable the technology has become. So I've been working, like I said, in technology for a while now, for like 20 years. And I remember trying to implement a lot of these things around artificial intelligence, and it wasn't easy and it wasn't accessible. I mean, there's projects that I used to do where we're trying to analyze. We had this one project where we're trying to analyze the the communication from emergency medical EMTs, and try to see where these events or incidents were taking place so that we could plot them on maps and things like that. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't, but now the way that AI has really grown, it's really made a lot of things more possible.
Hey, Chad,
Uh,
I,
mhm,
I got a, I got a question between
yeah.
your previous slide, which had,
Mhm,
I guess, what Alexa in 2014, and then you advanced like 8 years,
yeah, yeah,
and even before Alexa, and maybe even before Siri, weren't there these systems that were like natural language platforms? Like Quora comes to mind, where kind of
yeah,
like the big uh, um, revolution or evolution was that in search, you would put a keyword, right? A keyword
mhm,
search. And then in websites like Quora, you can now do a natural language question.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
can you comment on how much of Quora was an AI kind of implementation?
Yeah, so natural language processing, right? That technology, really, really, there's a lot of evolution around that. I would say in the 90s and the early 2000s, NLP really started to grab hold, right? I mean, partly because of the amount of information that we are getting, right? There's so much information because of the internet. So, not I'm gonna date myself, but pre-internet kind of days, right? Um, and post-internet, if you look at how much information there was, the amount of information that was sent into the world became huge, right? After the internet became really accessible, and that necessitated what we needed to do with natural language processing, right? I think Google did a lot of work around that too, right? So if you think about how we Google search and what was before, you know, like Google searching. But when Google started to evolve, they're able to kind of pick out the intentions and the things that you wanted to do, and or you look for, and without looking for keywords. Because previously, you would, I mean, without this natural language processing and ways to find, I want to say similarity, right, or of what you're looking for, you would do something like a keyword search, right? It's like, oh, what words are they searching for? Are they searching for, and can I match those with like how frequently does that come up in this particular content, right? And that might be the way that you're trying to match this search with this content, right? But with natural language processing, there's a way to tokenize a lot of those terms and to be able to find the similarity, right? So that's a huge. It's not necessarily uh, the key technology or key ingredient with the new artificial intelligence, but it is definitely it was a way to start getting that information and making it more accessible for the different types of technologies. I guess, when I was talking about this chat GPT, I guess how is there a way to have a show of hands? I'm just curious how many people use chat GPT like currently. Is there a way to do a poll? Can I get a can I get a can I get a reaction? Okay, I got a hand. That's pretty useful. Yeah, well, why don't we see if we can get a hand reaction? Just how many? I see one so far. Yeah. Okay. Is there and Bert, is it okay if I kind of like deviate a little and just kind of ask a question to the class? Does that happen? You're on mute, Bert. Is that okay? Okay, okay. I'm gonna ask
Yes,
a
yes,
question. Okay, okay. I'm gonna ask the
yeah,
question
yeah.
to all y'all. Um, I guess when you use ChatGPT, those of you who do use ChatGPT, I'm just curious what context do you guys use it, or what's the purpose of how you use ChatGPT? If anybody wants to answer, Emma, yeah.
So where I work, we come out with a lot of new cocktails and like food items. So recently me and my manager, we've been using ChatGPT to come up with like catchy names for cocktails or like come up with Halloween cocktail ingredients. Um we just came up with a ube like pina colada drink. We named it Ube Believe in Paradise and we got that from ChatGPT.
Okay.
So
Yeah, like brainstorming and creative types of ideas.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Anyone else
Great.
want to offer something? No?
Um,
Okay.
can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Oh, we got,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can hear you.
Yeah. So I often use it to like find synonyms or like paraphrase stuff. Like I don't
Hmm.
trust it too much as a source of information, but if I already have my sentence or word, like I ask for synonyms or just other ways to word things.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, it's really good at generating different types of ideas. Like I sometimes need some ideas for some of my projects, and I'll just ask it for like a huge list to brainstorm with, and I end up talking or not talking, you know, uh, interacting with ChatGPT in a way where it does somewhat feel collaborative, right? So I'm chatting with ChatGPT in a way that it's almost like it becomes like someone in a room that I can bounce information from. And that's kind of where, like I was saying, that's a lot different than what you do with Siri or with Alexa. It was always with those, it was always like ask based, like, hey, turn on the lights or play me this song, right? But the way that when ChatGPT came out, it then became something that you can have almost a conversation, right? And in a way that it became natural to just kind of write in these chats and these threads and have these dialogues, and that's kind of where I was going with, like, hey, this is a new way of interacting as with technology that's kind of like a proxy for a person. That goes back to what I was talking with Eliza, right? That was, I think, similar in a way that it was programmed to keep the conversation going, but it didn't know anything. Now, ChatGPT knows a bunch, right? It doesn't know everything. It knows a bunch because it was trained on more, and it has a way to keep the conversation going. And I think that's very interesting. And ChatGPT isn't alone in this, right? So there's a lot of different types of these systems. Like when you use Gemini or Claude or Copilot or even Perplexity, Perplexity is more of a knowledge-based chatbot. It's not more of a dialogue chatbot, I would say. But if you use something like Pi, have you any of you guys used Pi AI? Okay. So that one is very conversational based. It's really interesting to try. It's more like it kind of feels like what Eliza's kind of thing was, right? You can like it's like having a conversation with a friend more than like a coworker. Um, and that's a really interesting chatbot. But the way that the evolution of these chatbots are is they become more natural, and they become ways that you can have a conversation with them. And now one of the things like that's really interesting is that when you think about modern technology and accessibility to information, now that really changes things as well, right? So now you can have these you know um, domain specific type of information with these different chatbots, right? So now we have the technology to have this conversation. right? And we're integrating technologies to say, I want to have a conversation maybe about my health, right? So instead of talking directly to a doctor, right, you may talk to a chatbot that knows everything about your health and everything that the doctor knows, right? It becomes this way to communicate almost with the doctor, but not really with the doctor, right? And this kind of goes with and Bert, maybe we can talk about, that thing that we were talking about earlier about like, with Ian and the way that he created this. If you go to ChatGPT, you can create this custom chatbot, right? So I don't know if anybody have created this custom GPT. But essentially, it asks you a bunch of questions, and you can create this chat GPT that is specific to some domain or specific to some set of information, right? Like you said, it's hard to trust chat GPT on its own about what the information, if they, because it wants to be, your like this conversational partner that want that that always gives you an answer. So that's one of the challenges, right? It doesn't necessarily want to say, "Oh, I'm not sure." So it'll make something up every so often, right? Um, but this custom GPT is a way that you can feed in a lot of knowledge, and you can say, "This is the tone I want you to have. This, I want you to talk in this style, and this is everything you know." And now we're going to have a conversation, right? So there's this experiment that one of our colleagues has done, and they had a lot of conversations with someone, and it was all these transcripts and everything, and they fed it into this chat GPT, right? And this custom GPT. And unfortunately, this person passed away, the person that they're having the conversations with. But they were able to take their previous conversations now and have the conversations with these chatbots, right? This chat GPT as a proxy for having those conversations with this person who had passed away, right? So that's an interesting kind of dynamic that people may start to have with these artificial intelligence, right? Is that it becomes a proxy, it becomes almost an avatar for somebody else, right? So
Chad,
yeah.
that example that you just described, which our colleague Ian implemented, when he told me about that, it reminded me of a Star Trek episode where there was an avatar or a simulation that was built upon a scientist that was a companion, or sort of like a virtual companion and colleague of the engineer on one of the Star Trek episodes. And it was really interesting because it retained the characteristics of that engineer, but it didn't have some of the maybe characteristics it retained, but some of the personality traits maybe weren't quite all there, right? So when the engineer actually met the person, there was a little different experience and different expectation. But I think what Ian did with Pua's background, I thought, wow, that is, we're literally living in this sort of Star Trek world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's these concepts of digital twin. I think that's going to start popping up, right? Is that you're going to have this AI representation, and it's kind of I'm going to talk about the better or for worse kind of things about this, but this digital representation of who you are based on all your knowledge and the way that you have interactions with other people or with other systems, right?
What sort of also makes this relevant to some of the things that we're reading in the book, and we just covered a couple of chapters, one called Person and another called Presence. And if you think about it, a lot of what we do and interact on these different platforms, could be recorded. And in the case of what Ian's um, experiment did was he recorded some conversations and then ran it through an AI sort of translator called a transcriber called Tactic, right? And so it turned it into the actual knowledge base based on an audio conversation. And for the class, we've been talking about what does it mean to be descriptive of your person. I mean, you know your person better than anybody else. And then what does it mean to be present? And if a lot of that is then conveyed in a manner that is recorded on either could be a podcast, it could be in social media, or even on TikTok, and then that becomes a representation of you, then that knowledge base could then be imported into a chat GPT and becomes it becomes a proxy of you, if that's what the experiment is, right? So it does make a difference to convey yourself in as honest a way as possible. Those knowledge bases are going to be ultimately created.
Yeah, for sure. And there's going to be, I mean, so much of our life now, right, is recorded and is archived somewhere digitally. So it is there, right? All your email interactions, all of your conversations, our conversation right now, right? It's going to be there. So that's an
Yep.
interesting thing, and the way of in the past there's been too much information, but in the future that's not going to be that much the way that technology moves. So with this chatbot thing, it's and this AI interaction, it really starts to so now we have like things like ChatGPT, right? Where you're having these natural conversations. And then the other huge technology I think that kind of came up in the last few years was this, I'm calling it speech to text to speech. Because the way that we're able to take speech or any of our conversations, like just like Bert was saying, you can take these and you can just can get the transcription, right? Automatically get all this text from all this speech, and then you can take a lot of that text and convert it back into speech, right? Very quickly. So these technologies like OpenAI has this whisper technology, and there's this technology Hume, which I kind of discovered a few weeks ago. And what this is that it actually can take it scores for the emotion of the speech that it hears, right? So if you're excited or if you're sad, it'll give these ratings to say, oh, the speaker is sad or the speaker is excited, and using that, right, we can start to say, oh, then maybe I should respond in a way that's sympathetic, or maybe I should respond in a way that's also excited, right? So being able to detect not just what they're saying, but their intentions and how they're saying it, adds so much context into the interaction with these AI things, and also 11 Labs. I don't know if you've heard of this technology or this company called 11 Labs, but they're able to generate speech from text, and it's really really good. I mean, it sounds almost indistinguishable from somebody else talking, right?
And
so
and
so
Ted,
Mhm.
that text to speech, there's systems out there that you can actually train it on your speech,
That's right. Yeah,
and then
your
you
voice. Yeah,
feed it in the text, and then it'll basically say something that you input in your voice, basically.
yeah. So you're having these, so you could create now and these aren't technologies that are inaccessible, right? They're very accessible to somebody who just knows how to piece these things together. So creating something that can respond like you know, is a lot easier. or like it's somebody else, right? And I think those are some of the dangers to all of this. But you take all of these technologies together, and then you get these companies and these other products like Character AI. I don't have you guys used Character AI? Actually, have never used
No.
Character AI. But it becomes this fully artificial intelligent like I don't know how to describe it. An entity that you pretend you're interacting with, right? So some people have these fake boyfriends or girlfriends or relationships with these AI systems that don't even exist, but they have like these pictures, these AI pictures of them, and they pretend like you're sending text messages or something, and the similar like replica, which is like similar to that, except for it's like a 3D rendering of these, people, these avatars, and um, it's like it becomes a replacement, I guess, for your interactions, right? Like I said, in this case, most of these aren't necessarily for business. They're more for personal interaction. They become a replacement for your personal interactions. There's this company called Synthflow that actually takes the technology that we just talked about, and like it provides, like when I was talking about this voice, our customer service, right? When you call on the phone and say I have a customer service issue, and you're calling somebody on the phone. SenseFlow creates this way to automatically respond as if it was somebody that you're talking to on the phone, right? And it uses those technologies, like Bert was saying. So it could sound exactly like me. So it'd be like me answering all the questions to somebody calling my phone, right? And it actually can do the opposite too, right? It can make the calls, right? It makes the calls and it interacts with the person on the other end, as if it was somebody else, right? The AI. And I don't know if you guys use the new advanced mode for OpenAI, but it's a conversational AI, which like it is very expressive and you can interrupt it as it's talking. So this technology is really moving forward where it's going to be able to be, like I said, it becomes a proxy. It becomes this representative of somebody who did or does not exist, right? With this knowledge base now that's able to answer all of these questions, right? So, I mean, where does that take us? And is that good or is it bad? And I'm going to go through some of the benefits that I feel, and I'll go through some of the other considerations. And this is where, like, maybe we could talk about what you guys think, because I'm interested to hear it. Again, I'm building an AI product, right? And taking it's good for me to understand all of these things too, from more than I already do. And so one of the good things though, so it is that the way that AI can understand speech now, it can also understand it in a multilingual type of way, right? So it adds accessibility to people to get access to particular knowledge or to get help if they need it, and without having to have somebody who understands, individuals like humans that understand all of these different languages, right? So most of these are going to be about accessibility, right? It opens that accessibility for multilingual support. It also helps scaling the services. So it's more, you can imagine when there's these things like, for example, the hurricane that Florida is experiencing, right? And all these people that need help, all these people that need support, they need to file insurance, claims. They need to contact FEMA and all these things, right? If you had AI to help push that process along, right? To have these conversations and understand what they really are needing and help file the right applications, or at least lead them to where they have to go in a way that everybody can contact that, help at any given time. I think that would really help scale the ability to help a lot of people, right? So that's really going to add to the accessibility of helping more people, right? With the AI, it's also able to, like I said, pull in information. It can pull in personalized information, right? It can pull up your account. It can see what happened earlier. It doesn't it's able to understand the history of your interaction with the company, with your interaction with a government agency, right? And it helps personalize all that advice that it can give you. Like we were talking about how AI has a voice now, right? And previously, you would maybe have to just chat with it, and we still do by typing, right? So, but it can actually do both, right? So with this technology now, you're able to interact with maybe this chatbot that can speak with you and it can type visually, so you can see all the text at the same time and it'll be consistent. So that's really helpful for people who are visually or hearing impaired, right? One or the other, to have a consistent conversation and to get consistent help with an organization or a company. And it could help reduce human bias. And I'll tell you, maybe it doesn't, but I mean, if it's done right, it can help reduce the human bias that would be on the other end of that phone call. I guess I'm going to open it up here real quick. I know we're going to run out of time. But does anybody else have any thoughts of if you think that there are benefits to this technology? No?
I do think so. I am actually in a Spanish-English translation class, and just today we had a presentation about AI, and they showed us how in Tokyo, there's like metro stations where like the person who's selling the tickets or like the information person and the tourists can speak thanks to AI because it provides like real-time translation like on the screen between them. So I think that's really useful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I do think that being able to use AI to support helping other people and getting directions and things like that has huge potential. Okay. And so,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I got a question. So
yeah,
in that example that Lillian just brought up,
mm-hmm.
Where would the kind of the commercial viability be for that feature to be actually built? So like, let's say, in the work that I do,
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with a lot of sort of marginalized communities, and they could be, let's say English as a second language, or some marginalized communities that may not have access to some of these technologies. So they're at the very, very baseline understanding of digital technologies. I can see where these capabilities, like the bullet that you have, accessibility for visually or hearing impaired.
Mm.
Although I would agree that it's very important and probably very enabling. Who would actually pay to build it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So for social services, right, I feel like the government would want to adopt these technologies to help support these communities, right? I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be research, right? They don't have to pay for research grants around this. The technology is available, right? They just
Mm-hmm.
they would pay to put this in there and to help really scale the services and make it accessible to these other communities, right? But for companies, I mean, I feel like it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, the more support that you can have for all of your customers, right, is better, right? If you support multilingual support for your product, right, you're going to have better customer satisfaction and across more people, and I feel like that's kind of a no-brainer.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are some of the good things, but I think there's some ethical, considerations, and all of these I feel like, there's I'm going to go through them one by one. So one is there's potential abuse around this, right? So what I talked about, and we were talking about somebody, creating this AI to have this voice, this realistic voice of possibly somebody, and possibly somebody in authority or somebody you're familiar with, right? Like a relative, right? And that could be used to manipulate. I think we've had these a couple years ago when we were talking about like elections and things like that. I mean, they've been talking about phone calls that are imitating, like the president or something like that, right? And there's these potential for people to easily create these AIs that that will be that could manipulate other people, right? Because now you can have this conversation and the voice is going to sound like somebody or somebody in authority. And I think that's a huge danger, right? For potential abuse. And along the same lines, if they sound like they're in authority, it can spread misinformation, right? Right. If you don't realize that on the other end is an AI talking to you, and if you are talking to this AI, the person who programmed it could create a script in a way that it can conduct these phishing attacks or ways to get sensitive information from you that you shouldn't be giving out, but it's going to find a way to convince you that, hey, give me this information, and it could it could harm things like that you should be keeping sensitive, right? So I think those are three ways of abuse. And also I did talk about how it could possibly reduce human bias, but that's only if it's trained properly, right? If you so all the AI, all these AI systems are based on all this training data, right? And it's not just that training data, but it's ways that they call like fine tuning the models, or getting this other knowledge base and sticking into the model. What if that does exclude these exclude a certain community, right? Right? What if it excludes a certain group that can now then not have access to the services that we were hoping that AI would provide access to, right? I think that's a big risk if we don't do it properly, and also if the training data itself reinforces the bias, right? Because it's all that training data is going to be derived from something that's kind of human, right? If that bias is already baked in there and we don't do a good job of making sure that it's not sticking in there, the AI is going to also get that bias, right? I think that's a huge problem. Um, and the last one I was going to talk about is just the potential of job loss, right? So if the AI now can represent all these people, where did maybe all customer service representatives, like what would they do, right? What's the impact going to be? How does this get rolled out in a way that it doesn't necessarily take away all these jobs at once? Because that could be a huge problem, right? And another thing that it has the potential to do harm, where it has the potential to do harm, is that lack of human judgment, right? So sometimes, like maybe you're talking to somebody for help, right? And they're going to be like, "Well, I understand your situation, and it's kind of different, or it's kind of special, and this is what I think we could do." That may not be there with the algorithms or the way that the AI is trained, right? It may not have that. Humans have a way of kind of being able to make these decisions or these judgments based on their human intuition. The AI does not have that, right? It's not that much further from what I talked about with Eliza, because it is still just providing back this response, but it doesn't have any understanding, right? It's not real understanding. It can gather data, but it's not real understanding. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else, any other concerns that you guys see in these AI technology? Those are the big ones, I think. Um, and I guess I'll just talk about real quick, and to kind of just finish up um, this presentation. But I just want to talk about what's next, and here are my guesses, right? And again, I've invested, I think this technology has a lot of potential for good, but like I said, it has some potential for harm, right? So there's scary things around this. But I think it has a lot of benefit. But my guess is of what I think comes next are as things like augmented reality and virtual reality, come into play. You won't be just speaking with these avatars or these proxies for human. You'll be seeing them, right? So there's going to be a physical or pseudo physical form around surrounding these these AIs, and it's going to feel more like a interpersonal kind of conversation or relationship. And beyond that, if you put this into something as like robotics, which is also going to start, taking off, then you'll be talking to this AI in the room that's physically in the room with you. And I think that'll be you know, uh, an interesting shift if that ever happens, where you're actually speaking with a physical presence in there. And this other one here, and this is this is something that's already kind of happening when you hear things about these agents or groups of AIs, is that the AIs themselves are going to start talking to each other, and they're going to have like these groups and teams which are going to start making these decisions as well. So you'll be talking to not just one AI or one chatbot, but you'll be talking to a team of them, which I think will also be very interesting. But that's it. That's all I got. I guess it was a long presentation, but that's all I got. I don't know if there are any
So,
questions. If it's a few minutes for that.
yeah, Chad, I wanted to ask you, about the ethical considerations.
Mhm.
At what point in time do you think the amount of knowledge and information that's out there available for any of these chat platforms to use would leap that gap between, sort of non-sentient to sentient kind of being?
Yeah. I don't, so I'm not an expert on like artificial general intelligence, right? So I think that's like that for me it's hard to make a prediction on that. But it is a lot of, you see a lot of, there's this new model, right, from OpenAI, which is the OpenAI 1.0 model, which incorporates this way of, they call it like, I forget what they call it, but it's like reasoning, right? So it kind of like it goes through this step of trying to think through things. It's that thinking fast and slow type of thing, right? Where it's like there's some decisions or there's some responses that takes a little bit of reasoning to go through and provide an answer. But again, like the sentience part, I think that would require understanding. This capability for not just understanding, but for maybe but for empathy and things like that, to really get not just the context of what was being asked of them, but the context of the situation. I haven't seen anything that really provides that level of sophistication.
There's a question in the chat, and it is pertinent to the questions that I gave the class. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you use this technology in your sort of business.
Yeah. So I use it a lot. Um, Again, I have a really small business, and most of the time it's me working on things by myself, right? So what I use it for a lot is almost like if you have like a Slack conversation or something with one of your colleagues and say, hey, let's brainstorm through something, or like here's a bunch of information. How can we kind of make an outline for this? I use it a lot as a collaborator, right? Which I feel like is a good use right now, especially about how to use AI. I use it as a collaborator for sorting through my thoughts, for helping create like a task list for myself. Like sometimes I have like 100 things to do, and I say, hey, I have 100 things to do. These are what's really important to me, and could you help me match those up, right? And it can help me get a list, a prioritized list based on that. So I use it a lot for that, or I just use it for like there's one project I was working on that I'm trying to like create like um a bunch of different like novel images. Like let's say like it's like a horse playing the guitar while wearing a hat or something like that. And I needed to create I wanted to create hundreds of those, right? So I use this technology to like say, hey, this is my goal. I want to create a bunch of these ideas, right? That for images, like let's go through that, right? So I'll go through it once and I say, hey, that's not so some of those are not good, or some of these I need help creating this more on this theme, and and just help generate things that way. So I do use it for a lot of brainstorming or idea generation. I think that's primarily what I use it for.
And then maybe in conjunction with that question, how do you then use what you've learned through whether research or experimentation to advise your clients?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of how you interact with this technology, right? I mean, because a lot of people can will use this technology to try to do the things that I do, right? Like come up and brainstorm. But it there's combinations of these things you can put together, right? So it's not just brainstorming, but it's also summarization, right? So if you put together summarization, brainstorming, and then generating outlines, and then going through each of those outline points and creating more details or other sub bullets for those outlines, right? And then saying, oh, this is what I think we should say, and say how, what's a good phrase for this. And so just working with it in a way that it's your conversations and your requests stack on top of each other. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that like the combination of putting this technology together with that and with existing knowledge bases that you might have and how those fit together. I think that's what I talk with my clients about, of how we can most best use this technology with the existing things that they have and the goals that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions? Any questions from the class? Another great opportunity to talk to an expert. Okay, well, Chad, no, appreciate the presentation. Oh, here's one.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, how do you think it'll impact computer-mediated communications?
I, I I think the biggest impact, right, is the biggest impact I feel like is really not. There's going to be a transition period where you're not exactly sure who you're talking to. Like I said, like there's going to be companies that are going to set up these chatbots not just for like how you're using a chat GPT, but to directly answer your emails, right? Or to directly answer your text messages. And you may not know um, who you're talking to, if it's an AI or if it's a person. And even when you get to the point where you maybe having Zoom conversations, with the way that the technology is evolving, you may not know exactly if you're talking to a real person, right? So I think the impact is really trying to figure out. I think people are going to have to start to navigate, communicating with or what they're communicating with. And I think that's going to be a challenge, especially, you know, um, in the next 5 years as all of these things start to transition.
Chad, you gave me an idea. Maybe I'll try it. If I teach this class next year, I'll take all the lectures that I did for each of the chapters. I'll have it be transcribed through Tactic, and then I'll create an avatar that says it back in my voice. And so the class will be conducted by what they think is me, but actually it's an avatar that's running on my AI.
You should try for at least, yeah, try for just one class and just see what happens.
But thanks, Chad. Any other questions? Okay, very good. So Chad, here's another one. Look, does AI affect your own navigation and thinking skills in a way making you lazy or enhancing your skill?
I think it does both. So in ways that it makes me lazy. So I use this service called Perplexity, and I've ended up whenever I have questions, I used to always Google them, and it's always like, well, why don't you just Google it? Now I use Perplexity, which kind of does the Googling for me and the summarization for me, where I don't read through 5 different sources. I get a summary of 5 different sources. And I think that's somewhat made me lazy of not in a way, or giving me the expectation that I can just get the answer without sifting through any information. Right. So my expectation now is that I'm just going to get the answer that I'm looking for, and I don't have to look for anything. In the way of enhancing my skill, though, skills, I think it helps me. It helps in different ways, right? I think the biggest one is the way that I can brain dump into some of these tools, right? Like ChatGPT, and just kind of like have a train of thought without going back and thinking if that thought is coherent with the previous thought I had, right? So I work on a lot of different projects, and I have a lot of different ideas swimming around in my head, and sometimes I just need to get them all out at once, and then I ask for the summary of all of those, and then it helps me kind of structure these things in my mind. And I mean, it does it for me, but at the same time, that structure kind of sticks with me, which helps me tackle some of these things more directly and more specifically. So I think that's where it's been really helpful.
Well, and I think, Chad, to that question, we all are becoming more and more, information-based and knowledge-based workers. And I find in my case, there's so much information that I need to draw upon that I will invariably, miss something. So using some of these tools help to make it more efficient, make it more complete in terms of trying to respond to a particular, let's say, project or hypothetical, that it's not making you lazy, it's making you better, I guess, equipped to be more thorough and organizing your sort of information in a way that's more comprehensive. And to me, if that can help to reduce the amount of time you would need to research and cull through all the things that you've created and make it more efficient in terms of the turnaround, to me, that's not being lazy. That's basically trying to be more efficient.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank Chad. Great presentation. That presentation is available in the resources. And what I will do is also put the recording up in resources, so you can check it out if you missed anything. And then you do have the questions to answer before next week, Thursday. So I want to wish you all a great rest of your Thursday and a good weekend. I'll see you all back here on Tuesday for the next chapter on that difficult word to describe propinquity or something like that. Anyway, you guys get to read it. You guys get to tell me how to pronounce that properly. But that's the next chapter in our computer media communications book. So anyway, you guys all have a great weekend. Thanks, Chad. Mahalo. And
All right. Thank
see you
you.
guys
Thank
next
you.
week.
Bye.
Aloha.